Somewhere right now, a man is standing outside a house at 2 in the morning, hooking a chain under a car that isn't his. He doesn't have a warrant, he doesn't have permission, he's not a police officer, and he's about to drive away with that car, completely within the law. That's not the strangest business on this list, not even close. I found 20 of these. Businesses that sound like they should be illegal, that feel wrong the moment you hear how they work, and every single one of them is completely legal in the United States. Real numbers, real mechanics, ranked from strange to the one that genuinely stopped me when I found out how much money moves through it. Number 20, locksmith services. Someone's entire job is bypassing locks. Getting through a door you're not supposed to be able to open, using tools most people would assume are for burglars. Fully licensed, fully legal. Gross margins run 60 to 70%, and the demand never really slows down because people lose keys in every economy. Startup costs here run under $1,000 for certification and basic tools, which makes it one of the cheapest businesses on this entire list to actually start. And the skill itself isn't the barrier. Picking a lock is genuinely learnable in a matter of weeks. The real barrier is trust, because a locksmith is someone you're letting bypass the exact thing meant to keep strangers out. Number 19, storage unit auction buying. When someone stops paying rent on a storage unit, the facility can legally sell off everything inside it. Not to the original owner, to strangers, at auction, sight unseen. You're bidding on a locked metal box based on nothing but a flashlight glance through the door. Sometimes it's junk. Sometimes it's genuinely valuable. Either way, you now legally own someone else's entire storage unit of belongings. Every state has specific laws governing exactly how this has to work, how many notices the facility has to send, how long they have to wait before the sale, how the proceeds get handled afterward. Follow those rules, and it's a completely legitimate way to legally acquire a stranger's possessions, based entirely on a debt they couldn't pay off. Number 18, process serving. Someone has to physically hand you the papers that inform you you're being sued. That's an actual job. Process servers track people down, sometimes show up at their workplace or their door, and legally hand them documents they very much do not want to receive. One real business in this space pulls in over $1 million a year, combining court research, investigations, and process service. Number 17, the unclaimed baggage store. There's a real store in Scottsboro, Alabama that has operated since 1970, built entirely on airline luggage that never gets claimed. Over 1 million people visit every year to buy through what's inside other people's lost suitcases, marked down 20 to 80%. Somewhere between 0.5% of all checked luggage in the country ends up here, and it's been running as an actual legal retail business for over 50 years. Number 16, crime scene and biohazard cleanup. After something violent or tragic happens, someone has to clean it. Properly, safely, under strict regulation. It's not something most people could stomach, which is exactly why the people who do it aren't fighting off much competition. Owner income in this business has been documented as high as $525,000 a year. Starting a properly equipped operation costs around $160,000 for a certified van and the right protective gear. That barrier alone keeps this from becoming crowded. Most people, understandably, would rather pay someone else a premium than face that job themselves, even briefly. Number 15, foreclosure cleanout, also called trash out. When a bank forecloses on a home, someone gets paid to legally enter that house and clear out everything left behind. Furniture, photographs, sometimes decades of someone's life, all of it removed and disposed of on behalf of the bank, often without the original owner present or consulted in the moment. Operators typically earn $500 to $2,500 per property, and a full-time operation can clear close to $100,000 a year. Number 14, private investigation and skip tracing. Following someone. Digging through public records to find where they live now. Watching a subject in public to document their movements. It sounds like something you'd need a badge for. You don't. Licensed private investigators do all of this legally, using public databases, legal surveillance techniques, and information anyone technically has the right to access. Number 13. Bounty hunting and fugitive recovery. Here's the detail that actually surprised me the most researching this entire list. In states where bounty hunting is legal, which is most of the country, a licensed bounty hunter can enter a defendant's own residence without a warrant, based entirely on the bail contract that defendant already signed. That authority doesn't extend to anyone else's home, only the person who signed the agreement. And it's not universal. Illinois, Kentucky, Oregon, and a handful of other states have banned commercial bail bonding entirely, which effectively eliminates bounty hunting there too. Where it is legal, though, it's a level of entry authority that even police generally need a warrant for. And this exact practice is illegal or non-existent in Canada, the UK, and most of Europe. The legal reasoning behind it actually traces back over a century to an 1872 Supreme Court case called Taylor versus Tainter. When someone signs a bail bond agreement, they're agreeing, in writing, to the bondsman's right to recover them if they skip court. That signed contract is what gives a bounty hunter authority most law enforcement doesn't have, but only over the person who signed it. Bounty hunters in the US reportedly catch around 90% of the fugitives they go after, typically earning 10% of the total bail amount for a successful recovery. Number 12, bail bonds. A bail bondsman pays a defendant's bail in full, then charges a 10 to 20% non-refundable fee for taking on that risk. If the person skips court, the bondsman is on the hook for the entire bail amount, which is exactly why bounty hunters exist in the first place, hired by bondsmen to track down the people who ran. Number 11, auto repossession. This is the business from the very beginning of this video. A repo agent can legally take your car from your own driveway at any hour without a court order, as long as they don't breach the peace to do it. No confrontation, no breaking in, no threats. Just a chain, a tow truck, and a legal right that most people don't realize exists until it happens to them. The legal term is breach of peace, and it's doing a lot of work in this industry. As long as the agent doesn't force entry, doesn't physically confront you, and doesn't take the vehicle from an enclosed space like a locked garage, they're generally within their rights. Typical pay runs $275 to $450 per vehicle recovered, and in 2026 specifically, this industry has been busier than usual. Rising interest rates and higher car prices have pushed repossession activity up more than 20% year over year. Number 10, rent-to-own stores. Here's a genuinely strange legal detail. Because rent-to-own agreements are typically classified as rental contracts rather than loans, most states don't require these stores to disclose the transaction the way a traditional lender would, as an annual percentage rate. State rental purchase laws generally do require disclosing the payment schedule and the total cost to acquire the item, but that total cost rarely gets translated into the interest rate language most people actually understand. You could end up paying 2 to 3 times an item's actual value over the length of the contract, laid out in a payment schedule that looks manageable on paper. Number 9, buy here, pay here car dealerships. These dealerships sell you a car and finance it themselves, often to customers no traditional bank would approve. Interest rates can legally exceed 30%. If you default, they can repossess the car and in some cases resell that same vehicle to another buyer on the same lot under the same terms. It's a legal business model built almost entirely around people with limited options. Number 8, payday loans and check cashing stores. Borrow $500 for 2 weeks and the fee might be $75. That sounds almost reasonable until you annualize it. That same fee structure works out to an APR that can legally exceed 300%. It's regulated, it's licensed, and in most states, it's completely legal. The industry argues these loans exist to bridge a genuine gap, that banks won't lend small amounts for short periods to people in financial trouble, and someone has to. Consumer advocates argue the opposite, that the fee structure makes it extremely difficult for a lot of borrowers to actually pay off the original amount before it rolls over into another cycle of fees. Both things can be true at once, and the business itself remains entirely legal either way. Number 7, pawn shops. A pawn shop makes money two separate ways on the exact same transaction. First, the interest on the loan itself, which can legally run as high as 20 to 25% a month, depending on the state. Second, if you don't pay it back, they keep your item and resell it at a markup. Either outcome is profitable for the shop. Gross margins often land between 40 and 50%. Roughly 30 million Americans use a pawn shop every single year, and the average loan is small, often under $200. It's high volume, small ticket, low overhead. Thousands of tiny transactions, each one profitable on its own, adding up into a genuinely large industry that most people only think about when they need fast cash for something they own. Number 6, structured settlement buying. Someone wins a lawsuit and gets awarded payments spread out over 20 or 30 years instead of a lump sum. Companies exist entirely to buy those future payments off of people today at a steep discount, then collect the full amount over time themselves. A judge has to approve the sale, which sounds like a safeguard, and often is, but the business itself is built on profiting from the gap between a stressed person's need for cash now and the value of money later. Number 5, life settlements, also called viatical settlements. This one is genuinely uncomfortable to say out loud. You can legally buy someone else's life insurance policy. They get a lump sum of cash now, more than the policy's surrender value. You take over the premium payments, and when that person dies, you collect the full death benefit. Your return is better the sooner they pass away. It is fully regulated, fully legal, and built on a bet most people would rather not think about too closely. This market actually started for a specific, sympathetic reason back in the 1980s. People dying of AIDS held life insurance policies they desperately needed cash for immediately, not decades later. A market emerged to buy those policies at a fair discount, giving dying people access to money while they could still use it. That original purpose still exists, but the mechanism itself, profiting more the sooner someone dies, remains exactly as uncomfortable as it sounds, no matter how legal or well-regulated it is. Number 4, ticket scalping and resale. Buy tickets at face value. Sell them for whatever the market will pay once the event is close to selling out. In most US states, this is completely legal, protected as long as you're not using bots to buy in bulk. Resale margins on high-demand events routinely exceed 100%. On limited sneaker drops, resale markups have been documented as high as 300%. Number 3, patent trolling. A company buys up patents with zero intention of ever building anything from them. Then it waits, watches for any business that might be infringing on the broad language of that patent, and sues or threatens to sue for a settlement. Legal experts widely agree this is technically legal, even when it's considered deeply unethical, because no law explicitly prohibits owning a patent purely to extract settlements from it. Number 2, debt buying and collection. Collection agencies buy defaulted debt from banks and lenders for pennies on the dollar, sometimes as low as 1 to 15% of its original value. Whatever they manage to collect after that, up to and including the full original amount, is theirs to keep. It's federally regulated, but the core business model, buying someone's unpaid debt for almost nothing and then legally chasing them for the full amount, is completely allowed. Picture a $5,000 credit card debt that a bank has given up on collecting. A debt buyer purchases it for $250. If they manage to collect even half of that original amount, they've made a 10 times return on their initial $250 investment. Multiply that across thousands of accounts bought in bulk, and you start to see how this becomes a real, scalable business, built entirely on other people's unpaid bills. Which brings us to number 1, vulture funds. These are investment funds that specifically buy distressed or defaulted debt, often from struggling companies or even entire countries, at massive discounts. Then, instead of negotiating, they sue for the full original amount owed, sometimes decades later, with interest added on top. Documented returns on these deals have ranged from 300 to over 2,000%. A former UK Chancellor of the Exchequer once publicly called this practice morally outrageous. It remains completely legal, and in some cases has resulted in court orders forcing developing nations to pay tens of millions of dollars to funds that originally paid a few million for the debt. One documented case involved a fund purchasing debt from a struggling economy for around $3 million. Years of legal pursuit later, a court awarded that same fund over $100 million. That's not a rounding error or an estimate. That's a real court judgment, entirely within the law, on a debt that traces back to a fraction of what it eventually cost the country that owed it. So here's the pattern underneath all 20 of these. None of them are illegal. Every one of them found a real, uncomfortable gap in the law, in human desperation, in timing, in who has power and who doesn't, and built a legitimate business directly inside that gap. Some of these are genuinely useful to society. A locksmith getting you back into your house at midnight is a good thing. A bounty hunter returning someone to face their court date is doing exactly what the system asks of them. Others sit in a much grayer place. Legal does not always mean fair. A 300% interest rate on a 2-week loan is legal. It is also, for a lot of people, the difference between a bad week and a genuinely ruined year. I think that's the actual lesson hiding in this list. The law draws a hard line between legal and illegal. It doesn't draw nearly as hard a line between legal and right. And the businesses that make the most money sitting exactly on that second line are rarely the ones getting talked about, because looking directly at them makes almost everyone a little uncomfortable. Which is exactly why they keep quietly making money, year after year, while nobody's watching.